Hi, Steve. As I had mentioned in the introduction, your book is one that I've been familiar with for a long time. And so this one's sort of inspired by my mother, who I think was the first person to actually hand the book to me, or at least lend me a copy. And she had the book because she was trying to inject UX into her organization. She was a nurse and working on healthcare IT and so forth. And so my question for you is, if somebody who is new to UX or trying to inject new UX into their organization, what are some tips you have for them beyond purchasing your book for their boss?
Yeah, I have people who buy it for themselves and then they leave it on their boss's desk, and it's oftentimes sort of just curious looking enough that somebody will pick it up, and if you pick it up, it's profusely illustrated, so people often read it, which is kind of good. I do have one sort of favorite tip, which is I think the way anybody who's read the book knows that I am such a strong believer in doing usability testing, and I think that's the most cost-effective and powerful thing that you can do to increase people's understanding of UX and their ability to make the product better, whatever. There are lots of UX techniques, but I find usability testing to actually be still pretty much the best. And though I'm always trying to get people to run their first UX test and get their boss to come and watch. And so that's sort of my favorite piece of advice is if you're not currently doing usability tests, then do one on your own time and invite people to come and watch. And if you are doing them, then try and figure out some way to get people higher up to come and watch, even if you just tell them it'll be good for morale or whatever. What I usually recommend to people who haven't been doing them is to start off by doing a usability test of your competitors. Which is a great thing to do, and it's a very much underutilized technique. It has an enormous number of advantages. The main one is that everybody's interested in how the competition's doing. People tend to assume that if you're doing a usability test of your stuff, that it's probably going to be sort of okay, and they hope it should be sort of okay. But there's this Schadenfreude thing where they would love to see how bad the competition is doing, or how good the competition is doing. So you can pretty much count on getting a crowd if you do say, all right, next week we're going to be bringing in 3 people. We're going to do a quick usability test of our top competitors, and we're going to have people do the same tasks that they do on our site. Only going to watch them do them on their site, and we can pretty much guarantee that you'll learn a lot from this. Now, one of the nice advantages of this is that because it's not your stuff, nobody's ego is on the line. You're not going to be turning up problems where the poor coder or product manager or whatever is going to be sitting there looking sheepish and embarrassed because it's not your stuff. So it's actually a great way to get started. That's my favorite.
All right, great. Thank you.
And thanks to your mom, by the way.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Do I have, who would like to go first?
Guaranteed not to bite.
Jonathan?
Doesn't even have to be a question. You can tell me a little story about something you're doing. It's interesting.
We got someone coming.
I'm going to talk about my kids. No.
Okay. Name first.
My name is Jonathan Evans. Hi. And when you were talking about, well, I guess Tom was talking about leaving book on the boss's desk. One problem in our field is getting the main stakeholders to come and watch. And how do you incentivize stakeholders to come and watch? Really good snacks, just bribery, plain out, or how do you get them to come on by?
Well, snacks, in either one of the books, it does mention that snacks are my most recommended method. You want your usability tests and your debriefing sessions to develop a reputation as having the best snacks in the organization. So $4 a piece for the chocolate croissant, spend the $4 on food. And get the pizza for the debriefing lunch, get the pizza from the really good pizza place. It actually does work.
You want me to speak over here?
This round really is one of the better ways to get people to come.
Guy here.
But there are a bunch of other things. One is obviously you're going to do it conveniently. You're going to do it right there where everybody works. So you're not going to be off on some remote site. You're just going to be doing it in a meeting room down the hall from where they work. Two, you're going to do it on I recommend that you pick a fixed day. Like I recommend that you do a round of testing once a month. One morning of testing a month. And what this means is that you can pick a fixed day, like the third Thursday of each month is testing day. And that gives you the opportunity, everybody knows when testing is going to be. You can sort of advertise the heck out of it and remind them to death. But it's no big surprise and it's never going to move. So people can sort of start to plan on if they want to just pop their head in, they can do it on the third Thursday of each month.
Actually, along those lines though, when it comes to the reminders, I know one thing that, a little issue I know that's come up quite a bit is what type of reminders to send. You can either send like one all-day meeting request that lists the times, but people will generally forget, or you can send them, one for every single session, in which place people get kind of annoyed and don't accept. So that's kind of, what do you do for those situations?
Well, it's not all day. It's like I recommend you only do three people in a round. So you do 3 people once a month. So it's a morning. So you could basically your reminder is Thursday the 25th. Morning of Thursday the 25th will be our monthly usability testing session, and it starts at 9 and ends at 12. If you want to be involved in the debriefing and you want to have a say in what's actually going to get fixed, then you can stay for lunch right after that. We'll be serving the pizza from name of great pizza place, and that only lasts for an hour. So people are free to sort of drop in at any point during the morning, or hopefully come to the debriefing session. And the stake in that you want to posit in the debriefing session is you don't come, you don't have a say in what's going to get fixed, basically. So if you're a stakeholder, you probably have a reasonable interest in having a say in what's going to get fixed. So yeah, I wouldn't send out per meeting reminders. I want a reminder 2 weeks before. I want a reminder maybe a week before, and then the day before. And they should be really short. They should be 2 sentences. Testing tomorrow. Good pizza.
All right, I don't want to take everybody's time. Thank you.
No. But also, you will be getting the stakeholders involved because you'll be soliciting from them what tasks they want to have done. So you will already have gotten them involved in it at that level,
yeah.
Right? So,
cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Somebody else.
All right. Do we have another question from the audience?
Again, doesn't have to be a question. Can be an anecdote.
Or a story about your mom, even.
Hi.
I'm Abigail.
Abigail, hi.
And to kind of go along with the stakeholder thing, so we're lucky enough where we do get to have stakeholders in the usability testing a lot in the side room, but we have this issue where they tend to latch onto one detail and want to run with it. And do you have any advice for kind of pulling them back and really having them see the bigger picture or the actual problems that we need to focus on?
And are they doing this in cross chat while they're watching the test, or when are they doing it?
Yeah, cross chat, and even afterwards when I'm like presenting the results, they'll be like, well, what about that one thing that we saw with that one user that was really clear?
Okay, and again, have you seen the Rocket Surgery book?
The which
By the
one?
way, the Rocket Surgery Made Easy. It's my little second book. Okay, you should borrow a copy of that for something.
Okay.
And it's even thinner than Don't Make Me Think. It's about half the thickness of Don't Make Me Think. And it's basically my advice on how to run tests, how to do the leanest possible tests, and how to get the most out of them. And so when you go back to them and report on your findings, that's not what I recommend at all. Okay, they need to be, the team needs to be doing the findings. So basically, in as much of a nutshell as I can get it into, I recommend getting as many people as you can to come and attend in person some sessions, and then get those people even during the sessions to focus on the most serious problems. because it's crucial, because it's so easy to get distracted by low-hanging fruit, and it's so easy to get side arguments about, well, I think this part is really important because it's mine, you know. So I actually have a handout, which is a sheet that gives them 3 lines for each of the 3 participants they're going to watch in the morning if they come to all 3. And at the end of each participant session, they are encouraged by somebody who's your confederate in the observation room, reminded that they should immediately write down the 3 most serious problems that they observed that participant had. Okay, and so they walk out of that. They walk out of whatever sessions they attended with a sheet that has at most 9 things on it, okay, which they've already pre-digested as these were the significant problems that we saw. And that's what they bring into the debriefing session. I highly recommend having a debriefing session sort of right after the meetings. And the whole point of the debriefing session is to boil down, everybody just brings in those 9 problems. And they start by choosing 3 from those 9, and that's what they contribute to the group. You go around the room, everybody gets to, you write them up on the board, and you put additional X's after the ones that are, obviously a lot of them are going to repeat. And so you come to a group consensus about what were the most serious problems that we observed, and you don't discuss them. People contribute them, and it's sort of there's a group filtering process that works pretty quickly. And then the second half or whatever of that meeting, you go through and you run down the list, starting with the most serious problem, and you come up with some idea of what it's going to take to not fix that problem completely, but to make that less of a problem. And that's what you're going to do in the next month. Okay, so you're committing to, we saw these serious problems, what are we going to do next month to make them not serious problems anymore? Yeah. And so that's, rather than go off and do a report, where, then you get, if you go off and do a report, you're getting into arguing with them, and everybody has their own way of seeing it. And that's really not useful. I've done that for a long time. I've talked to tons of people who have done it for a very long time, and that's not useful, and it doesn't get fixed. So that's my recommendation. There actually is more in there's a chapter in the rocket surgery book about how to run that meeting, which in the interest of complete disclosure, I just made up. When I was doing the book, I thought, I should give them some advice about how to run that meeting. And so I thought about it quite a bit, and then I thought, well, this would be a really good process. But I made it up. Yeah. And it turns out that it works really well. I've had a lot of people write to me and say, yeah, we can actually do it that way. and especially the part about focusing on serious problems, having a process that sort of inherently focuses on the most serious problems. Because the problem is, if you've seen from your test, you can get into, the easiest thing to get into is the kind of creep where some participant has a specific problem with search, and during the debriefing or in the conversations between you and them after you've submitted your report, what they want to do is they want to fix search. It evolves into, we really need to fix search, and you don't want to go there. You just don't want to go there because you haven't got time. It'll never get done. So,
yeah, great.
Hope that helped.
Yeah, definitely did. Thank you so much.
Bye. Yeah. Okay. Get out of the library.
All right. Is there the next person that'd like to share a story or has a question for Steve?
Or a really good joke?
Or a good joke?
Don't be shy. Come on.
Yep.
How many people there have actually facilitated a usability test? You were the person sitting next to the participant and giving them the tasks, and one of you has to have a question.
Yeah,
right?
most of the hands up here. Yep, we had one person with a hand. Come on up.
Hello.
Hello. My name's
And-
Casey.
Casey, hi.
Nice to meet you.
Oh, is that Ash Wednesday Ashes?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Congratulations.
Thank you. So I'm working with a division of the federal government, and we tend to do usability testing once we have a really nice, what I'll call a formative idea of what we think the answer to a particular problem is. And it usually comes at the end of a fiscal year with a very tiny little budget. So I'm curious if you have any recommendations on how to get that done earlier and potentially ask for more money to do more testing throughout the year rather than, oh, we have an idea now, let's just go run with it.
Right. Okay. Yeah, there's two. I parse out two things there. One is more money, and so my first question would be, what do you need the money for?
So the money is used to help with the way that it's incentivized to allow people to come. Is
Right.
that they get an hour of paid time as part of their workday.
Oh, okay.
So getting the more money allows participants to be more free to come and join the sessions rather than, oh, you have to volunteer your time and you still have to
Right.
work the normal day.
Sure. And what's sort of, not to put forth any government secrets, but ballpark figure, how much is that you're paying a participant, average?
So on average, it goes to whatever rate that that person gets paid per hour. So it goes
Right.
anywhere from like $30 to $150 an hour, depending on who we need for our studies.
Okay. All right. And so if I'm recommending you do 3 people, then we're talking 90 to 450, if I'm doing the math right, dollars per round of testing.
So somewhere around that number, yeah.
Okay. All right. I guess it is government. So in most places, that's not like a crippling. If there's any motivation at all to do usability testing, that turns out most places not to be an unbearable amount of money to squeeze out of somebody.
Yeah.
But I can understand sometimes it is. So that's kind of tough. I mean, I'm not sure, other than getting the person who has to sign that check more enthused about usability testing. Is that the case? Do you have to deal with somebody who has absolutely no involvement in your? I mean, who can you get as an ally on your side to tell the check signer that they should fork over the $450?
So there are some, because they run an agile type of development, you can get the product owners on our side and some of the stakeholders. Once
Right.
they see, because we've traditionally done big studies like 15, 18 people,
Right.
and
Right.
they like that, but it's a little bit too late and not as frequent as to be able to catch some of the things that are inherently potentially wrong with the designs that we're making.
Right. Okay. Well, that leads us to without answering the first question, that leads us to the second question, which is how do you do it early? Because anybody who does this stuff knows that the earlier you can get started doing testing, no matter how minimal the testing is, and in fact, the earlier you do it, the more minimal it probably is, because you don't have a full-blown working, whatever to show. You either got sketches or some form of prototype or whatever. So generally, the tests don't take that long. The earlier you do it in the process, the less time, less of that person's time you actually need to do the test. And that's one of the nice things about it. So the question is, what's the worst thing you can do is to hold off on testing until you have something that's pretty well formed. Right. Now you actually use the word formative, which is encouraging because it means it's not benchmarking and it's not disaster avoidance last minute testing, which are both pretty worthless. But the earlier in the process that you can start doing the simplest amount of testing, which basically just means putting it in front of some users and asking them to try doing things, the better off you are, because obviously it means you're not going to have built out stuff. You're not going to have wasted a lot of time building out stuff that you will discover is not workable. So the earlier the better. What keeps you from doing that in your situation?
So with being in a distributed environment, the designers feel that they have, one of the barriers is that the designers feel like they have to have something really polished out of like Illustrator, for example, in order to start showing to people. And another thing is that the developers feel you must have something fully clickable to be able to get some nice feedback from.
Okay.
And those are two barriers that I can see right off the top of my head as to why we don't go as fast as we ought to.
Okay, those are pretty classic barriers. I mean, those are apart from we don't want to show this to people yet because we still know a lot of stuff that's wrong with it that we're going to fix in the next prototype, which is the stupidest possible argument, because the things that you're going to discover when you watch people use it are not the things that you know are wrong, they're things that you don't know are wrong, and that's why you do it. All right, so you've got to fight those two. You've got to fight those two impulses. One, that the designers think it needs to look really good, otherwise it's not conveying their vision. And the coders think that it has to have a lot of functionality because coders are fixated on functionality. And if the functionality isn't trivial and not sophisticated, then they feel like it's not showing them to good advantage, or so it can't possibly be effective. So you're fighting those two bad impulses. My take on it would be, do you ever get any of those people to come and could you, if you don't now, which I guess you don't, get some of those people to hold their nose and come and watch a usability test that you do on a very rough prototype? So basically ask them to try an experiment. This one time, I'm going to ask you to give me what you have now, okay? And we're going to spend since each test will only take about 15 minutes, we're going to spend an hour next Thursday, and we're going to have 3 people in, and they're going to, and we'll only have to pay them for 15 minutes of their wage. And we'll see what we can learn by doing what everybody, it's not just me, what everybody now recommends, which is the leanest possible, earliest possible usability testing. And you can, I would recommend, do you know Laura Klein's stuff? I would recommend, get Laura Klein's book on, I think it's Lean UX methods, Lean UX something, I can never remember the title of it. Basically, since she comes out of the lean startup school and basically is touting the same things I am, there's probably a lot of good guidance for you in there about how to talk to them.
Okay.
And how to do stuff as lean as possible.
I do like the experiment. I think that's something that, especially since we thrive upon either the Skype for Business or in live session for testing, it's really easy to add somebody to an invite.
Yeah, exactly. And the remote stuff works incredibly well. I mean, since as we see, screen sharing works really well. The remote stuff can work really well. So that's what most of the cool kids are doing now. Actually, I mean, the people I know who do it professionally, and they do a very large percentage of their testing remotely nowadays because there are so many advantages to it.
Okay.
So yeah, I would say give that a shot, and yeah.
All right, great, thank you.
Sure.
Right,
Thanks for the.
Much appreciated.
See, it's really not painful. You must have a question.
And we have somebody else already lined up. Come on up.
I don't think I've ever had to coax people to come up and ask questions before.
Hi Steve, I'm Pallavi. I'm a researcher at Edinburgh. So I have a happier problem in our case. Our product team and our design team, they have a lot of activities for learning from our customers and attending to the research. And they wanted so much, they wanted to do some of it themselves. So what's your advice on how best we can share some of these responsibilities when they have a research team in-house?
Sure. That's a great problem to have. That's the best problem to have. Yeah. Because you don't have time to do it all, and they should be doing more of it than you can possibly do. So the fact that they're interested is fabulous. And I used to go around, I don't do as much anymore. I used to do public workshops teaching people how to do usability testing, do-it-yourself usability testing, and now I do them mostly in-house. Really, you just want to give them some guided practice. I mean, you could even bring them in groups of 5 or maybe even say 10. I mean, I do like 25, but you could do 5 or 10 at one time. And what I do in the workshop is I basically have them team up with each other, pair up with each other, and take turns being participant and facilitator. And they follow the script. You've got your own script. I've got a script in the rocket surgery book, and they follow the script, they read the script out loud, they basically have a task or two, and they conduct the usability test on this other person. It's actually very good practice for people to practice being both the facilitator and the participant, because some of them have never been participants in the test. That's really useful too. And I find that people tend to pretty much get it just from doing it, because I don't know if you have whether you believe it, but I think there's nothing to it. That's why I spend so much time going around trying to teach people to do it, because I do believe that almost everybody can do a pretty good usability test. Out of the box, they can do a reasonably good usability test. After they've done 2 or 3, they can do a good usability test where they'll learn valuable stuff. They won't be as good as you are, but they'll be good enough to get the significant value out of it. And the biggest thing that I find that you have to drum into people and get them to learn is to keep their mouth shut. That's the hardest part for people who haven't done usability testing, is there's such a temptation to want to help the person or to want to ask them more questions, that it's really hard. So in fact, when I would have 20 people in a workshop and I'd walk around while they were all doing the test, and it's kind of like walking around a beehive or something, because there's all this noise, and so I can eavesdrop a little bit. But I realized that the rule of thumb for me was, if 2 people were talking at the same time, it was broken. Okay, there was only one person talking, and I should be able to identify the facilitator, because they're the person who's saying almost nothing except what are you thinking or what are you looking at. And I have a pretty, I approach it a little differently actually than some people do, which is, I think my scheme for tests is you read them the instructions at the beginning in your script that explain what's going to happen and how it's going to work, and then you ask them a few questions about themselves, and that gives you a little background about them, but mostly it gets them talking, so they're prepared to do the think aloud. And then you give them a task, you give them tasks. And while they're doing the task, all you're doing is making sure that they keep thinking out loud and they stay on task. That's it. So your mouth should be shut most of the time. And what I do is I maintain this rigid separation that once they're finished with all the tasks that they're going to do at the end, you have a separate probing section where during that time you can ask whatever questions you want to ask. You can ask the people in the observation room what questions they want you to ask. So it's kept completely separate. And that I found is the best sort of teaching lesson for them to free them up to keep their mouth shut. Okay, because if they know there's this rigid separate time, there's a point at which suddenly the bell will go off. It's like in salsa music when all of a sudden they blow the whistle and everything, all hell breaks loose. That after that they can ask whatever questions they want. So that, you can teach them. You can do fine. You'll do great. Yeah.
And are there some methods that work better than other methods where they can self-serve more easily?
So
various user research methods.
Oh, research method. Well, I do think user testing is again sort of the simplest and easiest for people who haven't done much of it to do. So I also think it's the most efficient in terms of turning up valuable insights. Valuable design insights. Certainly in the lean, again, I'd recommend Laura Klein's book because it's certainly valuable to get them to go out and talk to customers, and that's something that the lean startup movement has adopted as a research method, even before you're designing the stuff or during Sprint Zero or whatever, to have the people who are going to be doing the work go out, and not just the UX people, but have the designers and the developers and whatever actually go out and spend time talking to users about mostly it's about this thing that we're trying to improve for you, how do you do it now? Show me how you do it now. Show me what your life is like. And that's a great research method. It's really easy. You can in fact do that, but they can do that remotely too. The lean people talk about getting out of the building, but you don't even have to get out of the building. You can just virtually get out. So I'd recommend that, I guess.
Yeah, we've tried that and we've seen a lot more ownership of the findings and actually using all of them. So that's good.
Exactly. That's what you want, is ownership of the findings. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Arjan. I'm working for an IT consultancy company, and it's really a technical-oriented company. So a few years ago, we started a usability focus group to inspire the engineers more to do something with UX and usability.
Yeah.
We created books, flyers, organized events, and tried a lot to convince managers, but still most of our customers, they just hire us to program specifications. And do you have any advice for integrating usability into a technical-oriented consultancy company?
It's not the technically oriented part that's a problem, it's the consultancy part. And you are stuck in a classic bind, which is that your customers, here's the thing, I sort of, it was a couple of years after I started teaching workshops before I actually heard about this, and I just started to hear about it like crazy from people who work in consultancies. The problem with consultancy is clients perceive it as you are charging them to do usability work or UX work, particularly usability work and usability testing. You're charging them to go in and detect problems that you shouldn't have built into it in the first place. That's the hell of it, really. That's why it's really hard to if you present it as we're charging you for this in any way, they're going to balk, and that's why, because their attitude is, why are we paying you to fix your mistakes? And we hired you because you should design this stuff perfectly to begin with. And it is tricky. There's no, sadly, I have no great workaround to report for this, other than, do you ever get any of these clients and stakeholders to observe the tests in person, or you just do them and create a report and drop it on their desk? Tell them what you found.
Well, we had some projects where we could do usability testing for some managers which were really interested in it, and that were the projects that went okay. And but most of the projects, we as a focus group or as the people who want to do the usability testing, we're not allowed to do it, to spend time on it.
Right. I do not have a great answer for this. It really is. It's an inherent trap of doing UX in a consulting, as a consulting firm. The ways out of it I've heard are people who manage somehow to educate their clients, but not all clients are educable. Some clients will inherently understand that UX is important and valuable, particularly since the advent of the iPhone, which sort of turned the corner for UX in terms of something that's worth paying for. The only advice I've ever been able to give is to hide it, is to basically not tell people as part of, make sure that people never get the idea that you are charging them to do usability testing or UX work. Let clients get wind of that, because they will not like it. Some of them will be fine with it, but others will just not like it, and you will not be able to do it. So this is also partly between you and your managers. Your managers are negotiating these deals, and your managers are the one who wants to mediate with the client and tell you whether or not you can spend any time doing it, right? So I assume they're just sort of caught in the trap too, that they have some clients who they know are not going to be interested in paying for this. So I always tell people, well, just try to make sure that they don't get wind of the fact that you're doing it. Do it in as low rent a way as you can, so you're actually not using a lot of resources. Do as much lean usability testing as you can. And then if you feel like they're ready for it, then sort of reveal to them, send them well, that's dangerous, because if you send them a video showing somebody having a problem, then they're going to say, oh, you shouldn't have designed that problem and do it in the first place. So I think there's some people who you're not going to be able to get to support it, and others who you will. I wish I had a more hopeful answer for you. You might want to, have you ever posted this question in any place? Because there are, any consultancy is stuck with this problem, I can tell you, and maybe some people have come up with good solutions for it. I just don't know.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
All right, we have time for at least one more question.
I see a hand back there.
Yep. Should come on up.
Oh, I saw two hands then. I'll try and keep it terse so we can get to the other person. Hi.
So it's not so much of a question.
What's your name? What's your name?
Yep.
What's your name?
Pranav. So I work at an e-com firm, and I'm a product manager.
Great.
So not so much of a question, but rather drawing from your experience a little bit. So every once in a while, there's a point where conventional wisdom, conventional methods start to break, and then you're stuck and you're like, okay, I don't know what to do next. Everything that I've tried isn't working. So has there been a situation in your career so far where conventional wisdom kind of broke down? And if so, then what did you do to kind of work around the situation?
A good question for which I'm sure I don't have a good answer, because I've always been a consultant, so I don't feel like I've ever dealt that much in conventional wisdom. and also, if I've been so blissfully and fortunately kind of unconstrained, I consider most of my career I've been able to do pretty much what I want. So in convention, I'm trying to think of conventional wisdom breaking down. I am a big fan of brainstorming and drawing on the wisdom of a small group, not a very large group, like 3 or 4 people. If you've got more than 4 people in here, then brainstorming's kind of stupid. There's actually there's a methodology that I was fortunate enough to get exposed to in college by accident that I've drawn on ever since then. And I have a reference to the book in the bibliography for the recommended reading for Don't Make Me Think. It's called Synectics. But the problem is that there's no there's a book about it, which is what I recommended, but there's no easy way to learn it. But basically, I would say I would prefer to get like 3 or 4 people together and ask them to think as wishfully as possible about what the solution would look like for this problem if there were no constraints, and start with that. But again,
So
I
just kind of leading on to where this question is coming from.
Sure.
So the larger the firm is, the bulkier the backend infrastructure gets usually, right? So let's say we were facing a problem with our users not getting the right kind of search results. And the search team, which is very isolated from the front end and from the UX, kind of came up with a 1-year plan on fixing the search, right? And that's not something that works in the short term or the medium term. This was kind of an impasse that we had where our customers wanted something completely different and we didn't have the capabilities to provide this to the customer. So we had to have a workaround where we kind of alter the processes, alter the front end enough to be able to give the customer a convincing facade of what they want is what they're seeing. So kind of.
Did this altering the process and altering the facade produce in any way better results for them?
It is. Not as good as we would want, but
it just makes them feel better.
yeah.
I have a whole thing in the rocket surgery book about I am not one at all for holding out for perfect solutions. That I believe in tweaking things. That you recognize problem that people are having, and particularly if it's a serious problem, rather than trying to hold out for fixing it, think about what's the smallest change that we can make that will actually reduce the impact of this problem on our users. Okay, and let's try implementing that and see if it works. So I'm a big tweaking fan, which is sort of like what you're saying. And I highly recommend that because people way too often hold out for the one-year solution that's never going to happen. We all know it's never going to happen. And in the meantime, between then, even if it did happen, between now and the 1 year from now, people are still going to not be having a good experience with it. So why not do something that's going to make it a somewhat better experience, albeit not perfect experience? And I find that there's almost always some tweak that you can make that will significantly diminish the effect of any serious usability problem. Big fan of that. All right, thank you. Good luck.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Do we have? Yep, you
Straight
can come
back.
on. Yep.
Yep, there we go. Oh yeah, you folks have to get places, don't you? Okay.
Hi,
Hi.
my name's Rachel. I work for a public utility in Colorado. I grew up in Massachusetts and in Newton, so I know your area.
Right next door. I'm in Brookline. Yeah.
So I'm new to UX, but I've always worked on some functions of it as a business or systems analyst. I guess, and I don't know if this is an appropriate question, but I guess I was wondering how you would apply some of these same principles, not when you're building something in-house, but when you're looking to buy a large system, when you're evaluating vendors that are coming in, and how can you apply some of these same principles to make sure that you're not buying vaporware or buying something that's not going to meet, especially when there's a large presence of the users and their input as to, and I have an art background, so what's pretty is really important to me too, but sometimes I feel like they get really stuck on what's pretty rather than what's functional. So I guess I was wondering what you can advise on that.
Yeah. Sure. Buying stuff from vendors is just such a terrible problem because usually, I don't know, unless this situation has changed dramatically in the last 4 or 5 years, they, oops, sorry, Microsoft is asking me to do something, I just get it out of the way. Usually the tools that you're buying from vendors are not going to do what you need, and they're not going to alter them, and they're not customizable in the way that you need them to be. So I find it's usually a miserable situation trying to choose between vendors, unless there's like a clear, product leader, in which case they probably cost 10 times as much as the rest of them. So that's a dilemma itself. Basically, when you're trying to evaluate between these vendors, you're going in and you're sort of doing your own usability tests. You're going in and kicking the tires, right? You're going in and you watch their demo. Preferably, you go and use you use a client, you use the product of a client who's using their tool, right? If they will give you somebody where you can go in and actually say, okay, here's one of our customers, and you go in and try using what they built and see whether it's going to meet your needs or not. So in that case, you're sort of what you're doing is a one-person usability test where you're both facilitator and you're participant. You're specifying what the tasks are that you're going to be able to need to do, and you're going in and trying to do them, and you're seeing whether the thing actually allows you to do them or not.
I want to know even what questions to ask in terms of like what, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to know when going in what sort of things you should be looking for and what kind of questions you can ask.
Right. I think that, what I've had to do with, which you've had to do a couple of times, which is why I think it's so miserable, is you certainly want to know what it is you're going to be asking that product to do, right? So you know that going in. Then you want to evaluate whether or not it's actually going to really be able to do those in a way that is the way that you're going to want it to do. So is it going to, and then the trickiest part is it going to allow you to do them 90% of the way that you want to do them, and then the 10% that it can't do is just going to be miserable and is not something that they can customize or not something that you're going to be able to work around. And I find that that's what you're spending most of your time trying to do when you're evaluating a system like that, is to say, here's the things that we definitely want this tool to be able to do, and to what extent can we determine whether it's actually going to be able to do them and without taking their word for any of it. Right. So often that amounts to either having them implement something for you. So where you say, okay, go ahead and gin this up for us, and prove to us that you actually can do this in a legitimate production way, or show us another client of yours who is doing exactly what we want to do, so we can go and kick the tires and evaluate whether it's in fact exactly what we want to do and whether it works right the way we want it to work.
Right, yeah. No, I understand that.
Okay.
And now I have.
I'm sorry, we're different.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Sorry, Steve. The next session is lining up at the door, ready
Yep.
to start.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.